These are two separate different things. Okay, in a list, how to pass a list, meaning you give a list to a function, how you get back a list from a function, just like any other variable, really, no difference. Okay, and so anyhow, let's take a look. Now there is a, let me not scroll this actually, let's keep it over there. There is a function that we can use. It's called range, as you can see here. When you use the range function, it kind of looks like this. If you were to say that, I'm going to use the same numbers. Actually, right now on the screen there is no number, so I'll just use any number. If I use this range 10, okay, it will create a list for me that would look like this. That it's as if I created this list, starting from 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So what that means is that, okay, range could have 3 different variations, 3 different ways to write this range. One version has 1 number here, and in a few minutes I'll show you what it means to have 2 numbers there and what it means to have 3 numbers. If you only have 1 number like this, that means create a list for me, and by default the list starts from 0, okay, and by default it goes up 1 by 1 up until this number, and not including this number. So that means start from 0 and create a list, again, in increments of 1 or steps of 1. So 0, and then 1, and then 2, and 3, and so on until 9, not including this number. So that means until 9. That gives you 10 numbers in this particular case. Hang on, somebody else coming in. All right, so this is kind of, in a way, in a certain sense, you could think of it as this. You know how you say index, and then you say while index less than 10, and then you go up 1 by 1, sorry, and then you go up 1 by 1. This is almost the same, because you start from 0 and you go up 1 by 1 until less than this number. Okay, so that's what range does. It creates a list. Okay, by default starts from 0. By default it goes up in steps of 1. Okay, so as I said, there is another version, range, version that takes 2 numbers. If you have 2 numbers, okay, the first one is what we call the start, or the starting point. So in other words, I could have something like this, 5, 10. So I have 2 numbers here. That means start from this number, from 5, okay, and go up until this number, but not including this number. In other words, this would create a list that would look like this. Start from 5, okay, and then you go up 1 by 1, because there's only 2 numbers. There is no mention of what is this step. And so by default, it goes up by 1. So 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, and then that's it, because you stop before this second number. Okay, so this range will create this list. All right, and then we have another version that takes 3 numbers. So as an example, you could start from, let's say, 3, and then you go up till, let's say, for example, 15, and then the third number is what we call the step. So for example, if you say step 2, that means start from this number and then go up until this number 15, but before it, and go every two numbers, step of two, in steps of two. So that means it will create a list that would look like this. Start from 3 and then go up every 2. So that means 5, and then means 7, and then 9, and then 11, and then 13, and next one would be 15, but you have to stop before 15. So this is it. This list is the only one that would get created. All right. Any questions about this? So we could use this range function to generate lists for us in certain ways. Range receives integer numbers, okay, but they could also be negative numbers. Some people asked me previously, what about that negative numbers? Yeah, they could be negative number. Any of these numbers could be negative. All right, so, but it's integer numbers that it receives. All right, any questions? Should I move on? Because there are a few new things to learn today. All right, so I'll scroll my page on the left side. This is already on D12. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now, a for loop is just like a, just like a while loop. It does a loop for you, but there are certain differences between a for loop and a while loop. For example, you do not need to create, let me remove, no, let me actually leave it there. That's over here on line 76. Let's create a while loop just so we could, compare. How do you create a counted loop as a while loop? You have some sort of a counter. Let's take index, for example. Okay, so you have a counter that you initially set, and then you have the loop, and the loop has a condition, and you use that counter, and you go up until a certain other number. For example, you go up until this number. All right, and then at some point, you have to increment that counter. So this is a basic while loop, right? From line 76 to line 80. And in here, some work takes place in the white space, line 78 and 79. Now, for a for loop, this is the way it works. You say the word for, okay, and then you say a variable. This variable gets created at this point. Does the audio come first and video late for you guys? Oh, anything wrong? No? Everyone else is okay with the connection? You might want to, no? Okay. You might want, Adnan, you might want to either leave and come back, or try rebooting your machine. It may be that it's taking some other programs in the background and it's taking memory. All right, so for loop, it's the word for, okay, and then a variable name. All right, this variable, assume right now that this variable gets created at this point. Okay, so here, for a while loop, you have to create this variable index first, or the counter. You have to create it first. You have to set it to 0 first, or set it to some value, and then you can start using it. For a for loop, that variable, it gets created at this point, right here, after the word for. Then you could have the word in, okay, and then you have this range. And if you recall, we said that range creates a list by default if it's only one number from 0, 1 by 1 until that number and less than that, meaning that this is in essence, this range 6 that I'm highlighting on the left side. It's as if I said this, as if I said 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so it's the same as this. All right, so what that means is, let's leave it like this for now so I could explain things. So that what that means is, with a for loop, you go inside this construct, okay, this sequence, and every time that loop happens, one of this, so let me grab an annotation pen. Every time that you go in the loop, one is taken. So the first time, obviously the first one is taken, this is taken, okay, and it's put inside of this variable. Okay. So 0 goes into x. So now you have x equals 0. So then you go inside the loop. So whatever happens in the loop, in this case, it's just a print statement, and it prints x, which just became 0, right? So it prints 0. All right, so now your loop is finished. In this case, it's just one line. So you obviously have to go back to the line of the loop. You go back here. And now the next thing, you will look at the next thing and say, okay, so next thing is here. It's 1. Now 1 goes into x and goes inside the loop. And whatever is in the loop happens. So it prints, in this case, 1. There is nothing else in this loop, so it goes back to this line again. And now the next thing is selected. So 2, now 2 goes inside of x, okay, and go in the loop. And again, this gets printed, 2 gets printed, nothing else in the loop. So you go back to the line of the loop, just like while loop, it goes back there. And so anyway, it goes through all of this one by one until it reaches the end, until it reaches this point. And it realizes, oh, there is a wall. That's it, finished. So in other words, you will get to 5, okay, and 5 goes in there into x, goes in, print, and 5 gets printed. Again, goes back to this line and looks for the next thing and realizes, oh, there is a wall. It's finished. There's nothing else, so loop ends. So at this point, then it goes to this point, and there is nothing else in this case. So could you tell me, just like the question says here, what does this actually print? Based on the explanation I gave you. No. Osama? Yeah, 5 also gets printed, but you didn't say the 0. Yeah, it starts with 0, right? Yeah. So, and vertically, just like you wrote it, vertically, because it's print statement, right? And print by default goes down one line. So each time you print it, so it prints 0, and then it comes kind of here, like here. And then it waits here. And next one, oh, it prints 1. And then it comes here and waits. But you don't see, this is invisible. And come and waits. And then next one, it prints 2. And then it comes here and waits. And then the next one gets printed, oh yeah, 3, and so on and so forth. Finally, 5 gets printed, and again, it goes here and waits. Oh, there's nothing else. So, but these are these hard lines here, they're just invisible to our eyes, right? So, so that's what gets printed, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, any questions about this? So let me take this back to the way it was, which was range Okay. Uh, so somebody asked me the difference between a for loop and a while loop. So here I wrote for you on the right side what a while loop, an empty while loop looks like. Okay. And again, if we grab annotation, so some work happens on this in this place. So now let's see what happens if you wanted to compare while loop with for loop. If we wanted to do the same exact thing, how do we write this? So this is written as for, okay, and if you want to use the same variables, so for index in, you want to do from 0 until 10, one by one because of this, you see here, one by one. So that means in range what? In range 10, right? Start from 0 until 9, including 9, and go up one by one. And this is it exactly. In other words, work goes on, annotation again, work goes on here. So basically, you see these 3 lines of code that we have. Let's grab a different color, maybe green. So these 3 lines of code here that we have, okay, now it's all 1 line of code. Everything that we do here, start the variable, initialize the variable, go up until something, go up one by one, it's all in the same line. Okay, any questions? So in other words, let's just let's have a almost a real program. Um, if you were to do a print statement here, okay, and each time you just want to print the index, all right, this is what happens there. And here, you just have the print statement. So the 4 lines of code here, there's 2 lines of code here. Yeah, it's better in many ways, but there are certain times you might want to use a while loop. And also a lot of new students, because for the first couple of months they get used to while loop, they kind of feel like they can't get away from it, and they stick with while loop. But some of the questions, as you will see in a few minutes, sometimes the question says that you must use a for loop. Okay, so then you really have to use one. All right, so let's take a look at the next example of for loop question, just like quiz 7 wanted a return instead of print. Well, not exactly. These are completely different things. So Zainab is saying, just like question 7 wanted a return instead of a print. A while loop and a for loop are almost exactly the same thing in the sense that they're both loops. Okay, they both do the same thing. Now, print statement and a return statement are not the same thing. It may look like, because of the particular question, it may look like, and a particular function that you're creating, it may look like they're doing the same job, or that a code that somebody gives still kind of quote unquote does the same job, but they're completely different. They're completely different in the sense that a return statement, just like it says, it returns something from the function. In other words, when you call that function, you expect to receive something. And if you don't give back something, well, that's an error. Okay, now print statement doesn't return anything, it just prints anything, something at that point. Keep in mind, how do I show it? Let me see, give me a second. Let me see if I could find, see if I could find a trace paper. Trace, where is my trace paper? Blank trace paper from that uses also function. As I've also said to my other group, my own preference was, and still is, to show functions using tracing. Because for a lot of people, it's not easy to understand functions. And my view is that using tracing, we could get students to understand that better. Some of my colleagues, they had a different idea. They thought, okay, no, we have to stop using tracing. So, okay, there it is. I just found it. So let me open it. All right, so if I move this here, so this is a tracing table, all right? And yes, sir, and for for loops too. Well, for loops are no different, but okay, I'll try to do something given the amount of time we have. Let me see if I could make this. All right, so when you have a function, this is, you see this part here where my mouse is moving? This is how you trace a function. You have to write the name of the function up here and whatever variable is in that function. Okay, so here, the name of the function up here. And if we imagine this particular function has 3 new variables, maybe 2 were received, 1 was created. So let's take a quick look. I can't spend too much time on this because then my sections would be lopsided in terms of what I have been covered in here and in there. So let's take a look at function. Is there a function here that I could follow? Yeah, there. All right, so let's suppose this is further down the same file, all right? But let's suppose I have this function. In fact, it uses for loop and function, okay? So let's suppose we want to trace this, see this one, okay? So let's take a look at it. I obviously need to assign numbers here. So let's grab green and imagine that you're writing this in idle, and therefore this would be your line 1. I mean 0. No, sorry, line 1. Let's clear this. Line 1. Okay, line 2. Line 3. Empty here. Line 4. Line 5. And line 6. And this is it. This is all of your program. These are 6 lines. Now, grab maybe orange. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. What is the first line? If you have this, if you write this in idle and you execute it, what do you think is the first line that gets executed? Line 5, right? Okay, so in other words, here your tracing starts from line 5. And what happens on line 5? Now, of course, fruits gets created, but I don't have that much space here, as you could see. So I can't write the whole list here on my screen. So I'll just write here fruits. Okay, so fruits gets created. But you know that this really means this list gets created. Okay, fruits which contains this list: apple, banana, and cherry. Apple, banana, and cherry. Okay, gets created. And in other words, I mean this, let's put it here. Fruits and apple and banana and cherry. Do you understand what's going on? Because I don't have that much space, so that's why I'm asking you if you understand what's going on. Does everyone understand what happens on line 5? Yep. Yep. Okay, good. So then after line 5, obviously we go to line 6. In other words, we go to line 6. So what happens on line 6? My function is called, here there is a function called my function. So we're calling my function and we send fruits over it, like over there, right? So line 6, you get transported to this point. So I have to say my function. Okay, my function. All right, but this arrow also means that I get transported to line 1. In other words, after line 6, I go to line 1. So, but what happened actually on line 6? Over here, what happened? Nothing really. If you want to, not that if you want to, you have to bring this value just down, just like we did previously. Whatever variable has whatever value, just bring it down, put it there. So that means now fruits still contains apples, bananas, and cherries, okay? But really from line 6, now you went to line 1. So on line 1, you're here, my functions. And then what else? Food also happens on line 1. In other words, this variable food, it gets created. So food, and it happened on line 1. So what's in it? So now line 1 has apples, bananas, and cherries. Why? Because it's this, fruits, which contains this, that was sent over there. So now food contains the same list. All right. So after line 1, obviously you go inside of the function. So what happens? You're on line 2. So line 2, what happens on line 2? It's a for loop, and this variable x, okay, it just gets created. In other words, inside of this my function, variable x gets created. Okay, now by the way, once you go there to my function, you have to forget about whatever happens in here in the main area, because you see this arrow. If this arrow took you over there, so now you're in this world. Now you're in this world. You don't know anything about here. That means you have to stop. You have to kind of pause this fruit. You must stop filling it. So you leave it empty, okay, because you're not here. You're not in the main. You're over here. Okay, so now, anyway, line 2 then, x gets created. And what goes into x? Okay, food. Food, which is this particular thing. So the first value of food. What is the first value of food? It's apple, right? Because the first value of food, the first element, goes into x. So that means on line 2, x now has apple. Okay. Now you're in this world. You're over here. All right. So as you're doing line 2 and you're saying x contains apple, You also just bring this down. Okay, so food contains ABC, or apple, banana, cherry. So after line 2, you're at the end of line 2. You're over here. You go inside a for loop. So inside a for loop is line 3. So you go to line 3, and then what happens? There is a print statement. That means output. Okay, so our output is this column here. So you write apple. Apple. All right. And back here on line 3, you could really put these here, but you don't really have to. So you could say ABC. Okay. And the value of X, yeah, it's still apple. All right, so now you're at the last line here. There's nothing else after it. Therefore, you must go back to line 2, which is your loop, right? It's a loop. So after line 3, you go back to 2. So now in line 2, the next value of food goes into X. In other words, banana goes here. Banana. Okay. And of course, this stays ABC. And now line 2 is done. And you go to line 3. So after 2, you go to 3. 3 just prints, meaning it prints X, which is now banana. So you say banana here. Banana. And here you could just keep putting them back. Keep in mind, or keep a look on the left side over here. You see I'm leaving him empty because, once again, I want to emphasize, I want people to understand, because I'm over here, okay? I have no idea what's going on there. So this side is not even, I can't even see it. It doesn't exist. Okay, so here, ABC, or I put banana, cherry. All right, so after line 3, again, it's the last line of the loop. Therefore, I have to go back to the loop. That's on line 2. So line 2. What happens? The next value of food, which is, what was it, cherry? Okay, so the next value of food goes into X. So this becomes cherry. All right, this stays ABC, or apple, banana, cherry. And it's the end of line 2. You go inside line 3. Line 3 prints X. X is cherry, so print cherry. This file, by the way, is not a Word document. It's a PDF. That's why I'm using my pen here and not a keyboard. Okay, so print cherry on line 3. And of course, you can put this back. Cherry, apple, banana, cherries. Okay. Now, once again, you're at the end of line, at the end of the loop. You go back to the loop. So you go back to line 2. What's on line? What goes into X? Well, there is nothing else. You're at the end of your loop. Okay. So at this point, value of X stays the same. It stays the last thing that it was. In other words, it stays cherry. Okay, but you're at the end of your loop. So it doesn't really do anything else. You could just put that back, but you must go to line 2. Okay, after line 3, even though it's the last one, you must go to 2. That's how it realizes, oh, I'm here. I'm at this wall here. So I can't go anywhere else. Okay, and therefore, after, sorry, not there. Yeah, well, it's the same thing because it's this this list that gets transported and puts back in here. So anyway, it realizes at the end, and therefore it finishes. It goes here. It goes to kind of this point. Okay, but this point is the end of your function, and therefore you go back to where it was called from. So after line 2, Okay, then you must go back to line 6. Exactly, Zainab. So you go back to line 6. Where does it go to line 6? In fact, in reality, it goes, let me grab a different color so it's a little more obvious. It goes to this place. It goes to this point. It goes to here at the end of where that function was called. Okay, so it goes back here, and then guess what happens? Then on this side, nothing else happens because now you're outside of the function. But now you're back inside of the main area. So now all of a sudden, this stuff that was hidden, that was sort of paused, they come to life again. But there's no, in this particular case, in our example, is no use because it's just at the end of the program anyway. So, but anyway, they kind of, if you think of it as they were gray, and now all of a sudden they became very bold black. They came to life. So once again, fruits contains apple, banana, and cherry, okay, on line 6. But it's the last line, nothing else is here. So it's the end of your program. And so this is what happens. If you were to trace this program on the left side, this would be your trace. All of this has to stay empty because at this point, you get transported here. Okay, and so you have no idea what happens over there. And then back here, you get transported back there. Now, this particular program, this particular function, it does not have a return statement. Okay, as you can see, it's got print statement, but the print statement happens inside the function. In other words, even though it comes on the screen and you as a user, you don't know who printed it, whether it's the main area or the function that printed it, but it gets printed, but it happens in the function. Now, when you have a return statement, if you do have a return statement here, okay, if you do have a return statement, that means when you're calling it, you must call it with something equal to function name. Okay, so it's a requirement, just like input. You know, when you say input, you can't just say input. You have to say a variable equals input. So it requires that something gives back. So in the last line of the trace, the function column will be empty. The function, yes, it will be empty because you're back here. And now, just like you went over there and you had no idea what's going on here, when you came back here, you also have no idea what happened there. In fact, not that you don't have any idea. What happens is when you come back from a function on line 6, anything that happened in the function just disappeared, as if they never existed. Okay, they get wiped out. And I don't mean that, okay, so that means you have to wipe it. No, that doesn't mean that. It just means that food and X, they got killed. They don't exist anymore. All right, so now with this sidetrack, I think it was quite a useful sidetrack. And I prefer to have, like I said, to have done this tracing of functions earlier so you could see what's happening. In my view, students understand much better by looking at a trace like this and see how you actually go over there, how you come back from it. In any case, let me clear this and continue with our lesson. So let me close this trace paper. So by the way, this trace paper, I believe I put it on D12. I think back in week 3 or 4, maybe I put it on D12. So, but this is the way you use it. This top area, you have to say the name of the function and then the name of the variables if you have that you create in the function or get created or get sent to the function. Okay, so that's that. Let's go back up to where we were. All right, so here, example 2. So in example 1, we had one number here, which means start from 0, go up until and include 5, not include 6. Here we have 2. So that means start from 2 and go up until 6. And one by one, only one by one. But here also we have and nothing. So that instead of the last time that we had here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertically, okay, instead of that, things get printed next to each other, starting from 2. So the first one that gets printed is 2, and you go up by 1. So the next one that gets printed is 3, and see with this end, it comes next to it, no space either, you see? So it's really here, 23. The next one that gets printed is 4, next to it. Next one is 5, and then not the 6. So 5 gets printed over there. So this is what happens in this case. This is what happens in this case. All right. Now, why does 2 get printed and not 6? Well, see, that's the way the range works. You could have 3 numbers. You could have either one number, okay, like this, or you could have 2 numbers like this, or you could have 3 numbers. If you have one number, that means the default starting position is 0. So you start with 0, and you increment by 1. When you have 2 numbers like that, this is your starting number. The first one is your starting number, okay? And it goes up by 1, and it goes up until, but not including, this number. So why? Well, because that's the way it was created. That's the way it was designed. Whoever wrote this function range for Python, that's how they designed it. What you need to know is that the way it behaves, and this is the way it behaves. Okay, so the next way is 3 numbers. 3 numbers means start from this starting number, go up until this number, but don't include it, and go up every this many. This is called a step. So go up in steps of this many. So in this case, in example 3, you start from 2, you go up until 30, and you go up every 3 in steps of 3. Okay, so let me go back on the right side and create or mimic creating on line 90, creating the list that would get generated by that range. Okay, so it starts from 2, because that's the starting point, right? And it goes up every 3, like so. Goes up every 3. Okay, so that means after 2 is what? 2 and 3 is 5. Okay, 5 and 3 is 8. 8 and 3 is 11. 11 and 3 is 14. 14 and 3 is 17. You have to keep doing this until you reach 30 and not pass it and not include 30. So 17. After that is 20. 20 and 3, 23. 23 and 3, 26. And 3, 29. And you stop there. Okay, so example 3, this range generates this list. All right. Now example 4. All right. You could also do this. It's any kind of list. You could say for x in, and that list. In this case, the list is strings. So this apple as a string, okay, as a string, gets put inside of X. So it's as if to say X equals apple. All right. So every time you get to this line, one of the elements is assigned to this variable. So you say X equal apple, as if to say X equal apple, and then go inside. Next time, okay, it would be X equal banana. Next time it would be X equal cherry. So it could work also for strings. All right, any questions? This part. Moving on. All right, so now let's take a look at how we remove an element from a list. We have a couple of functions, actually more than two, but right now we focus on two functions that help us remove elements from a list. One is called remove, and it's a list function. What we mean is, see how you used to have dot lower, and I would say it's a string function. That means if you have a string called, for example, name or n, and you say dot lower, this is what happens, right? You say n dot lower, and we say it's a string function. Why? Because it's a function, including the dot, that attaches to a string. This is a list function. It attaches to a list. So we have a list called A in this case, and it contains 0, 2, 3, and 2. When you say the name of the list dot remove and then some value, in this case the value is 2, it goes through the list one by one from the left to the right, like this way. And the first time that it sees this value, it removes it. So in other words, as soon as it sees this, it removes it. All right. So now the list becomes 0, 3, and 2. But it removes the first occurrence, the first time it sees that value. All right. Any question about remove? So remove works with the value, the actual element, whatever is the element, and it removes the first occurrence of that element in the list. Now we have another one called del, as you can see here. Del works with one element, not the whole list. But you see what it receives at this point, what it receives is the index. As you can see, it's a square bracket. So here, this particular one, these are the indexes, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So if I say, and this is A is this list. If I say A1, what does A1 mean? A1 is this, right? That's A1. When I say del A1, that means remove 8. And so now my list is 9, 7, and 6. Okay, so that's how del works, and it works with index, not with value. Remove works with a value or an element. What if we want to remove 2 or more of some element? Okay, that's called slicing. That is also possible with del, but in this particular course, we don't want to learn about slicing right now. There's too much new material, and we don't really need to do that. But yeah, if you want to remove more than one, there are several ways you could achieve it, depending on how those or where those values are. One way is to, for example, use slicing. Another way is to use a loop. In fact, I think your first question, the first question today is going to deal with that. So you could use a loop to remove certain elements, and more than one element. Okay, so let me clear this and scroll this down. All right, so this we already, good thing, you know, we did that tracing at the same time. We kind of did this part anyway. We saw how you pass a list like so, how you pass it by calling a function that receives the list. Okay, and so the list now goes in here. And then if you were, so let me supposedly, let me do this. If for example, I had a return statement here, and if the return statement said return food, okay, so now I expect to receive it. When I call the function is supposed to, because here I put return, it's supposed to give me this thing. So I'm supposed to receive something here. Let's suppose, for example, call it new fruits. So if here my function says return, my main area, when I call the function, it also requires that I have this, that I get it and either give it to something, do something with it, not just call the function, but receive it. And this is how you receive. Okay, so I'll remove this so that we have the original Word document. There we go. All right. Let's take a look at our last thing here. Yeah. Let's take a look at the last thing. What do we have here? Yeah, just like it says here, Python functions have the ability to return. Forget about this part where it says or more values. For now, let's focus on returning just one value. Python is a nice language in that most other languages, they allow to return only one thing. When you return something to the calling place, you're only allowed to return one thing. Python, in fact, allows you to return more than one thing, but we will not learn it. We'll just focus on returning one thing. So in this particular case, you have a function. Let me use annotation again so that I could draw boxes. So in this particular code, this is the box of the function down until it's no longer indented. In other words, until here. Okay, so that's my function. Where is my main? My main is here. All right. Now, if I grab a different color, green, for example, for loop, that's the box for loop. Everything indented until same level is no longer indented, so it's here, right? So that's the box for loop. Right, and the if statement happens in this box. All right, so these are the boxes. Now, if you were to run this program, what happens? This line, let's grab blue. This line happens first, okay? After that, this list gets created. After that, this line happens. and then this line happens. So on this second line here, on this line, you're calling the function. So that means you get transported over here. When you get transported, you're also sending this, which is the list. So you get transported over here, and this list, which essentially is this list, right, gets sent over there. Now here in the main area, that list is called input list, and it contains this list, the one I'm pointing to. Okay, but when it's transported there, the same list is sent over there, the same value is sent over there, but now inside of the function, it's called something else. It's called my list. It's not called input list. So inside the function, input list is not known, but the same values are assigned to this variable name called my list. When you go in the list, in the function, you create a counter. This is just a counter, not like a loop counter, but a counter that keeps track of stuff. Here you want to track how many things are odd. So you have a counter called odds, you set it to 0. Now you go in a loop, and just like we saw earlier, you go in the loop from beginning to the end. Each time you get one value, assign it to index, and now you check that index. Is the index odd? If it is, you add 1 to your counter. If it's not, just ignore it. So now you go in the for loop over and over and over again, and until you finally get to the end of your list, which means here, right? The last one being 23. Once you get to the end of the list,
Sir?
odds, yep, odds have 7. Yes.
So the last print statement, it prints the odd number also, right? The first thing is counting the
It
odd,
prints.
second
Hang
is
on, hang
printing
on,
odd.
hang on.
Uh,
You said it prints odd. Where do you print odd?
Here, the last line, the print statement.
But you're not there.
So we are only
You're
counting
not
odd
there.
numbers.
Yeah, right now we're only counting odds. You're not printing anything. You're just counting them and adding to odds. So by the end of the loop, while when the loop finishes, finally this variable odds contain 7. But there is still no print. Nothing happening with printing. All that happened is one by one go through the list and count which one is odd. Is this odd? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Each time there is, just add 1. So now this green area, which is the for loop, finally finishes, right? When it finishes, you come outside of the green box. When you come outside of the green box, the last line of your function, it says return odds. So the value 7 that you had, now let me grab a different color. What color do I have? I don't know if red is good enough. Okay, let's try red. So finally, odds, which is 7, it is sent back to here where it was called from. The function was called from. But now, you see here, this equal sign here, it goes in there, okay? So now 7 came back and went inside of this this variable called odd. Okay, so now you're back in the main area. Now in the main area, you print odd is 7. But inside of this function, there is no print statement.
So, sir,
Go ahead.
in the definition part, if I print even index, so it will give me the odd number also together, right?
Can you say it again?
No, like if
Because I'm not
I
sure if I.
If I even print index with odd, so I'll get the odd numbers together.
If you want to print, you said, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to print the odds, then at this point, you see my arrow, I'm going to make an arrow. If you wanted to print the odds, then at this point, you would print. You would say print. But that means that every time you would print this, print this, print this, print this, right? Because it's in a loop. But right now we're not printing them, we're just counting them. And then we're sending back how many there were odds. And then whatever you want to do with that. In this particular case, in our particular program, we're just printing it. But that may not be what you want to do. You may just want to do something about the fact that you have now 7 odd numbers. But yeah, if I wanted to use your words and you said, you literally said, if I wanted to print the odd numbers, then yeah, you do this. You put the print statement in this place. Okay. Or here is another thing you could do. You could create. You see, this is the original list this year, right? This. You could send it over there and then create a new list which only contains all the odd numbers. So in other words, take this and then this and then this and then this and that and that and put them all in one list and then send back the new list. Now you have a list of odd numbers. So that's one other way of doing things. It really depends on what your program is trying to achieve.
So
Okay, so
the loop knows what is index?
The loop knows what is index. Well, not yes and no. Let me take away my annotation first. Yes and no. Okay, so what happens is, again, this whatever you say here, this word, whatever you say, is a variable that you're creating right at that place, right where I've highlighted. That's when it gets created. So no, it doesn't know it. You're creating a variable here. And now, every time you go in the loop, you take one value, the first value, and then the next one, and then the next one, each time in the loop, from this and assign it to that. So no, it doesn't know what it is. It creates it.
And it
Remember
sets
that,
it to 0?
Well, hang on. Remember that when I was talking about this part, so this is the while loop, and this is the same loop as a for loop. 3 things, this line and this line and this line, 3 things happen on the same line. All 3 things. The creation of the index, you see this here, line 76 on my right side that I highlighted. That is the same thing as this. So this is the same as this. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, so let's scroll this up. What time do we have? Oh, we only have about a half hour. So, okay, what's the question, Osama? So by default, the variable in for loop will be 0. No, the default would be the first thing, the first element. All right, so look at this one, exactly this one. If I send this, so this is essentially, this code essentially means that I have this list here. It's the same, it's almost the same thing, okay? So it's as if so the first element is 15, all right? So the first time, the value of index is 15, so it's not 0. Okay, so it's the first element, which is the There is no such thing as default of index being 0. In this case, why did I say this line on the right side, this line is the same as this? The reason is that range of 10 is the same as this. You see this list that I wrote here? Okay, range 10 means this list. And this list here, the first one is 0. That's why this line is the same as this line, this little bit. All right, so let me scroll up. Now you have a problem to solve. And you have half hour. I'm going to stay quiet for about 10-15 minutes. And you guys work on it. And then maybe quickly we could look at it together. And then you do questions 2, 3, and 4. Or is it 5 also? Yeah, 5 also. On your own, this is on B12. So let's focus on question 1 and work on it, please. It's gonna get your brain to work a little bit extra today, these problems.
So,
Because of the way you have to also work with for loop. Yep.
So it checks if the index is odd, or does it check the value is odd?
You're talking about this particular one this year.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's not talking about index. It has nothing to do with index. It looks at, right, sorry, hang on. No, it has the word index right now, in this particular case, the word index may be a little confusing to you because it's not really talking about the indexes. So let me put it here. Let me write the indexes because it's the same list here that gets sent over there, right? So it's obviously the same thing. So the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, right? But here, this word index that we have there is not really these indexes. It's not these red numbers. In fact, it's the elements. So it's a little bit confusing, I understand. So let me change the name. Let me change the variable name. Okay. So instead of index, let's call it for item. Let's call it item. For item. Okay, there. That's better. So again, this because this list is obviously item list, and item list gets transported there. So essentially, that means all of this list is sent over there. So now when I say my list, really is this particular list. Now, if I, just so it's kind of easier to visualize, if I were to take that and put it here, which is essentially the same. So what does that mean? That means go in this loop, go in this list with this loop, and take 15 and put it in item. Take the first thing and put it in item. In the loop, item, this is checking to see if it's odd, right? So is 15 odd? Yes. So you go in and add 1. You go back here. Now take the second thing, 12. Put 12 in item. Is 12 odd? No. So ignore it. You come back here. Take the third thing. Now it's this one. Item is 13. Is 13 odd? Yes. Add 1. Go back up. Get the next thing. Next thing is yes. And so on and so forth. So I understand that the word index was a little confusing because it really wasn't pointing to the index. It's just, sometimes our questions might be confusing that way. Sometimes that is even on purpose. to see if the student understands the difference between an item and the actual index. Okay, but it's a good question to ask right now so that you could understand. All right, I'll bring it back here. Problem 1. So solve problem 1, please. So as you could see here in bold, it says make sure you use a for loop. This question will require 2 loops. If you want to use one list, one while, one for, that's okay. If you want to use for loop for both of them, that's okay. But you must use at least one for loop. And there are 2 loops, separate loops, not one inside the other. You do one loop, you finish it, and then after that, you do another. For problem 1, why do you mean by that? So let's suppose, okay, so let's suppose, okay, see this list here I have on line 90 on the right side. I don't care which ones you remove, but it says every other one. So in other words, if you want to remove 2 and 8 and 14 and 20 and 26, that's okay. You can do that. Or if you want to remove 5 and 11 and 17 and 23 and 29, that's also okay. So just remove every other item from the list.
I thought you meant invalid inputs.
Valid inputs.
Negative numbers or words.
Well, -1 is supposed to be used as a sentinel loop anyway, right? So there's no negative
Already
number.
removed by default. So talking about -3, other numbers than -1.
Other numbers other than -1.
Yeah.
Well, you see, these are grades, right? So how could grades be negative?
They can put whatever the things they want, and the grade checker function will remove the unnecessary things.
Yeah, no, we don't care right now. We don't care. Let's just focus on what we're learning, which means for loop and remove and that sort of thing. For loop, range. So yeah, forget about user validation right now. But this is dealing with grades. So grades can be from 0 until 100. And -1 is used as a sentinel loop, a sentinel value. If you really want to make it really nice and introduce also user validation, yeah, sure, it's up to you. But
So that
it's
was
not
the
required.
question. That's why I started working on in that way.
Oh, whether it's a requirement, no. Oh, and one other thing, I just noticed the word traverse. I'm sure a lot of you have not heard that. So traverse, here I'm highlighting it on the left side. Traverse just means going through the loop. I've already used 2 other terms for you. One is going through the loop, and one is processing the loop. The list. Going through the list or processing the list. Another word is to traverse over the list. Means you look at each element one by one. So if we're looking at this element at the very top on the right side, it means look at the first element, then look at the next element, then look at the next element, one by one until the end. That is called traversing the list. Traversing over the list and removing the items, that's the one you have to use the for loop.
Said every other item. First, I thought
Every other item.
the wrong inputs,
So
like writing a name or something, it removes that. And if it's a negative number or over 100, it will also remove that, you know.
Well, that's okay. So that's extra. That's extra stuff you just put in. And so maybe, for example, I might consider it as bonus points. But the question is not asking for it. The question is saying, imagine, okay, the question is saying, let me just share screen again. That imagine you have this list, this here. If you had that list as an example, every other item. So remove this one, do not remove 12. Remove this one, do not remove 15. Remove this one, do not remove 13. Remove this one, and so on. Okay, but like I said, I don't care whether you start removing from the first one or you start removing from the second one, and then every other. Don't remove this one, remove this one. Don't remove this one, remove this one.
It's index.
Okay, that's really what
Just
it means.
every second index, something like that.
Right, right, yeah.
So
So this brings me to pointing out how, from the beginning of this course, I've been telling you about how it's the approach and the way people think that we care about, and the logic, and so that we try to get people to think about questions and not just return, not just give back whatever the course has taught them verbatim, like a history class or a geography kind of class. Questions usually are designed to make the student think about how to actually approach the problem and how to solve it. So yeah, that's exactly what you just did. Good job. Who was it? Taha just came back again. Okay. So anyhow, who wants now to share their screen?
Sir,
What about? Yes, Ahmad.
sir, can I leave and join again from my laptop?
Sure, but well, no, I would say no, because we only have a few minutes left, and it's the end of class.
Okay.
So let's see who's gonna share their
Sir?
screen. Oh, I need to unshare. Yes, go ahead, Adnan.
So I'm doing the second problem. Like it's not right, but can I
Okay.
show you still? Little
Sure.
confused.
Yeah. Six, 98. Okay, so in your case, Asif, I'm reading your text box, text message. It's not every other item in the sense that 6 and 98 are next to each other, and so they both were kept, and 44 also is right next to 98. So it's not exactly every other item.
Okay, I'll just redefine my function again.
All right, so let's take a look at who was it? Adnan, is it? Who's
Yeah.
sharing the screen? Yeah. So grade list is empty. You're getting some stuff. While loop is that. No, like I said, you have a while loop. You get the numbers, and then you finish the loop, and then after that you have another loop. So right now you're mixing a for loop and a while loop, which is not needed. So yeah, take away the two lines. No, actually just the line of for loop. Take it away.
This line?
Control exit. Yeah, Control X and put it at the bottom for now.
Should I remove it?
Yeah, completely remove it. Put it at the very bottom of your page.
Here?
Yeah, for now. For now, just leave it there. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's wrong anyway. Okay, fine. Let's stay with while loop. So in the while loop, okay, change those two lines inside your while loop, change them around,
This one?
change them. Yeah, change them, like swap them. Put grade on top of, yeah. Grade, cut, not copy.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so you're appending the what is numbers? Where did you get this numbers from?
No, I didn't change it. Wait,
The
wait,
word,
wait.
yeah, that numbers.
Wait, list.
Oh, here you call it numbers, over there it's called set range. Okay, call it grade. Type grade. Grade,
Yeah.
quickly, because we are not running out of time. Next line also, remove numbers, say grade. Okay, line 2 also. Set range, change it to grade.
It's going back to while loop, right? I was trying to do with a
Yeah.
for loop.
Also, the next line, set range, change it to grade. Okay, now of course the question is supposed to be proper. What is the grade, or enter a grade? That's what the question is supposed to be. But this is our first loop. Okay, so you have an empty list. You go in a loop. Each time you ask for a grade, you add it to a list. And this is it. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. This is the first 5 lines, and also the print statement after the loop. Yeah, so that's,
Where do I
so
use for then?
remove the second print statement.
This one?
Remove it completely. Yeah. All right. Now, exactly what you have on the screen. This is it. This is how you write the whole program.
This is
The for loop
first
is
one.
also the for loop that you have right now is also exactly where it should be, except it's not a correct one. So now in this for loop, you're supposed to go through the list and look at each element of the list. And then remove inside the loop, you would be removing every other item. So what is this range supposed to be?
Grade list?
Like the word num that you have, you say range num. Well, this is incorrect because we don't have anything called num. So now let's suppose, no, not quite. Let's suppose you have a list.
Yeah.
Okay, so in fact, go up 1 line and or 2 lines, go up 2 lines above the print statement. 1 line, yeah. Now put a hash sign. Put a hash sign, and then so this is a comment, and create a list. So open open a square bracket. Create a list. Now put some grades. Just hypothetically, put some grades in there. Anything, 10, comma, 85, comma, whatever. Yeah. So this is a list. So okay, fine. They're all in order. So when you imagine, this is how you have to do things. You have to visualize things. So imagine this is a list you have. When you imagine this, you say, okay, how can I use this inside of range?
I put the maximum number here.
You could go and range goes from some value until some value.
Yeah.
If you were to look at this list,
0 to 50.
and you know that it also has indexes.
Yeah.
And if you imagine the indexes, or even write them like a comment, write them above the list as a comment. So visually see it. The first index is 0, next one is 1, the next one is 2, the next one is 3, and so on. When you see that, and maybe sit back and stare at your code a little while, it will kind of start to take life. It starts to make sense. It starts to make meaning, has meaning. So you realize that, okay, well, when I say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which means 5 of them, what that really means from 0 until 5, which means it's a range of 6, which means, or whatever number it is that you're talking about, which means that really is the len of this list. So I could say range of len of the list. That essentially means from 0 until the len, but not including the len itself. And that's exactly how you have to think about problems in this course and in any programming course. Okay, so inside of range, you have to say len of your grade.
Okay, first then I have to make my len equal to.
Nope.
Then directly I can do
Len
it.
is already there. When you create a grade, when you create a list, it already automatically has a len.
Yeah.
That's part of what we learned about lists, right? So inside of range, just write len of your grade, len of your list, whatever it's called. What is your list? Okay, that's it. So now your range is from 0 until this number, whatever that number is, because you have no idea what the number is, because the user keeps giving in numbers until the person says -1. So you might have 50 students, 50 grades, or you might have 500 grades. You have no idea.
Mm.
But the point is, it starts from 0 until that len, and not including that len. All right. So now in the loop, you have to remove whatever index, whatever element.
The last
So you
index.
go in the loop. Well, it really says to remove one. So every time, keep in mind again, when you look at this hash line that you have, the red line that you have, keep looking at it and keep thinking, okay, now I want to take away the first one, maybe, for example, but not the second one. But if I remove the first one, then my new list starts from 20 and then 30
20.
and then 40 and then 50. And then if I remove the next one, which is 30, how do I do that? And then the new one would have 20 and 40 and 50. And now if I remove the 50, how do I do that? So that's why I said, yes, the student, when you take the student this course in programming, when you take a problem, you really have to think about it real hard. So it's not something that we just give it to you and say, okay, so this is exactly like the last one. Now do it exactly like the last one. You really have to think about it. So you have to sit back and think. Now, well, maybe I don't want to remove the first one. Maybe instead I remove the second one, 20. If I remove 20, what is left? The next or the new list will be 10 and 30 and 40 and 50. And so this time I want to remove 40, right? So
Yeah.
I have 10, the new one is 10, and then I remove 30. Sorry, I keep 30 and then I remove 40 and so on. So in other words, inside of your loop now, press enter. We're really running out of time. We really have to go. So now inside of here, you have to say del space. How earlier in the course today, we learned about del. So you have to take one single element. So you say your list. What's the name of your list? So del grade in square bracket. Now you say, well, what do you have? What's your variable name? Your variable name is n. So it would be n. Okay, now you could try. I'm not saying it. I'm not saying you do it. In fact, okay, if you wanted to, that n, you could change it to index. But again, if you wanted to, I'm not saying you should.
Yeah.
Hopefully you understand what this means though. The line of for loop says n, and the line here also says that n, the same n. So if you run this, I'm pretty sure you will have an error.
Yeah.
Because
So
you will hit, the reason is that you will hit the end and then you will go past the list and you will have an error. Okay, so I would suggest that before this line of del, but inside of for loop, you have an if statement.
okay. Yeah.
And the if statement would say that if this index, if n, is less than the len of the list, okay, that's when you delete. Only if n is less than the len, so that you don't go past the end of the list. Okay, so that way then you avoid going past the. It's almost like the same thing we did. Okay, it's almost like how we did, doing an average, and you wanted to make sure we don't divide by 0. So this kind of similar reason why, okay, you don't want to go past the end of the list, so you put a condition here. So this could work, and if it doesn't, I would suggest you could then change it slightly, change your code slightly, so that instead of removing the first item and then the supposedly the third one and so on, you start removing the next item. In other words, for your del, the del line inside of the square bracket, you could say something like n plus 1. So that don't remove, n plus 1. So that you don't remove the current item, you only remove the next item. And then you remove again the next item. But you have the if statement so that if your current item is the last item of the list, you don't go to n plus 1, which is after the end of the list.
So, but in this program, I'm not actually getting to choose what number I need to remove, right? So if I give an integer value.
So here's, hang on. So here's what I will say to you and to everyone else who's listening now, right now, is that trace this program. This is the best way that people would learn. And a lot of people don't like to trace, but trace this program and see what happens, to understand what happens, because you might run it and say, oh yeah, okay, kind of looks like it works, but do you really understand what happens? You need to understand what happens so that next time you do something like this. In fact, that you should be able to finish the next 3 or 4 questions and submit to D2L. So trace this code and understand what happens on each line. And now it's really at the end of our class. I have to go for my next class. Good luck, everyone. And again, finish. You can stop.